everybody. Welcome to the Sally Allen Podcast. I am so glad you're here today. And as you know, we use this podcast as a platform for people to share their stories of resilience. And today I have a special guest who will be sharing his story with us. And I'm so excited to have Evan Hartsell on our podcast. Evan, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to share. But a little intro on Evan. Evan is the founder of Club Christ, and he's currently pastoring at the church at Lake Mead. Yeah, and I'm sure you're doing a lot more than that, but you're being honest when you give me that short bio.
You know, my wife keeps me busy. All the things. I got 3 kids, you know.
Yeah, 2 boys and a
busy.
girl.
2 boys and a girl.
And yeah, they keep you busy. All right. So I did a little stalking. Sometimes I do use some stalking.
Yeah.
And I saw that you started Club Christ when you were still at UNLV. And before we started, you said you were 20 years old. And it's been 20 years. What propelled you to go into ministry at that young age?
Yeah, and Club Christ is a unique ministry in the sense that what it is a mentoring organization for kids, essentially from K to 12th grade, in really tough neighborhoods. So like, we have been in some of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods in Las Vegas. Our very first center started off of Martin Luther King and Cary. So it's in a really hard, it's typically, the joke is any Martin Luther King Boulevard in any town, it's a little rough, and it really it's always been designed really to just have a safe place for kids to go after school. Because often, when kids get home and they're in an environment that's toxic, and, maybe they're in a neighborhood that, typically has like gang violence and drug abuse and different things like that, their home isn't safe. They come home and there may be an uncle sleeping on the couch doing drugs or whatever there is, in the area. And and so Club Christ became this education center for kids. And it became just a really great way to mentor young people into kind of just their potential, right? And to remove any barriers from them reaching that potential. And so that's Club Christ.
Yeah.
And I was a kid when I started it. I was just out of my teenage years. I was at UNLV, so that's here in Las Vegas. And before that, I really didn't have an aspiration to work with kids. I was the youngest of 3, and I'd grown up in a pretty sheltered environment, honestly. Like, I had gone to Catholic school, and majority of the people in my class kind of all looked like me and it wasn't very diverse. And so for me to step onto UNLV's campus, that was, it opened my eyes to kind of how different the world is outside of my little bubble. And it really became a thing where I was like, hey, I'm open. Mm-hmm. I'm open to what's next, right? It's that kind of small sliver in your life where you're just like, I can be anything, And you're trying to figure out what you're actually going to major in because you're paying money to go to the school, but you just don't have no idea, right? And no, it was a radical encounter with Jesus my freshman year in college that reoriented my life to, instead of being me focused, to be others focused.
Yeah.
Because Jesus has a tendency to do that, right? Like he's not content with leaving us with our selfish agendas. He opens our eyes to the needs of the world, and just as he washes disciples' feet, he says, go out there and do the dirty work, to love people well. And I was inspired by that, honestly. I was really, really inspired to make a difference. And it took just some hard knocks and some different opportunities too, to really open my eyes to some of the need that I saw in the city. So,
But before you go into those needs and how you really got into it, what was your life like before Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, it really was a good life in the sense that I had my mom and my dad at home growing up. We did go to church every Sunday, but honestly, it was this box in my life that didn't affect me in my daily life. It was a thing I did. It wasn't who I was. And when my faith changed, it was honestly in college. I became a part of this Christian organization called InterVarsity, And their goal is to reach and disciple college students. And so they had been at UNLV for quite a while, and I got involved. And they invited me to a Bible study. And it was the first time, honestly, because I'd grown up really in a church that didn't open the Bible much. And even though I went to even a religious school, they didn't necessarily encourage you to kind of like talk about the Bible with other people and do like a small group. And so I was in this small group. We were reading Luke 5, and it's the story of Jesus getting into Peter's boat and telling him to go out and catch some fish. And Peter explained to him, he's like, no, I have not caught anything. And I've been doing this all night. And Jesus insists, and so he puts the boat out. They throw the net out, and this huge catch of fish gets in there. And immediately Peter just falls on his knees and says, Lord, get away from me. I'm a sinful man. And honestly, that was my real reality. Was even though I had kind of like this secure bubble that I'd grown up in, I didn't honestly it wasn't real resiliency that I had. I was very fragile. My ego was very fragile. I was very insecure. And I didn't have a sense of who I was. And so when I encountered Jesus, and I had all these Christians around me who were like really like confident and secure in who they were, it was intimidating a little bit, because I was like, do I really belong here? Yeah. Because I felt like a fraud, even though I was like acting the part. I would show up at these Christian events. Like I was drinking on the weekends and doing all the things that I knew I couldn't tell them about. And so it was really a thing where, as Peter said, get away from me, I'm a sinful man. It was like that parallel in my life was like, God, I'm not good enough. I don't think I ever can be. I'm just broken. And the thing that Jesus does next, though, is really incredible, because Jesus looked at Peter and he says, do not be afraid. I will make you a fisher of men. Amen. And I remember hearing that. And for the first time in my life, I realized I have a purpose. It wasn't just waking up, doing my thing and going to bed. I had a higher calling, and that was to be a fisher of men. That meant that I could help people discover purpose and meaning in their life, and I could be a part of making a difference, I guess, in the world.
I love that, living a purpose-driven life.
Totally.
And when you find that purpose, nothing can stop you.
Yep.
Because I think one of the things that I wrote down here is that if we don't expose our children to what's out there, you weren't exposed, then they won't know, and they can't really find their purpose if they're living in that bubble.
Yep.
Right? So I love that you found that. How did you find, and you realize, okay, I have a purpose, make fisher of men.
Yeah.
How did you get there to say, like, this is the need in this community, and that's what I'm going to do?
Yeah, it really was. One of the things that I really recommend for young people is to expose yourself to as many service opportunities you can, and just do every odd job, do every little thing that you could do in order to really just find out what your passion is, and just because there's less responsibility in those younger years to where like you're not working a 9 to 5, all that stuff. And so get involved, do more things. And I'm really like, one of the things that, I'm discouraged about in this next generation is the widespread apathy that's really kind of like been accepted in our culture. This failure to launch, right, concept of these 25-year-olds still stuck, essentially at home playing video games, and they are just really apathetic, about doing anything positive, unless it would boost their Instagram followers or something, whatever,
Yeah.
And so, for me, like I went on a mission trip. That was like my thing that moved me. And it wasn't like overseas. It was really just to Fresno, California, which you wouldn't think it's the armpit of California, but it's one of the poorest cities in the nation.
Yeah.
And it's got just a lot of needs. A lot of immigrant families have moved there. And I spent a summer really just serving at an after-school program. That was where I first discovered a model of ministry of like using an apartment to minister to an apartment complex that's where like literally like all the families are.
Yeah.
And you just get access to their world. And that's what we modeled Club Christ after. But like, yeah, I remember being on that mission trip and coming home and being ruined for the ordinary, right? Like, it's like that itch you can't scratch. It's that thing that you can't shake, that you're just not doing the thing you need to be doing, right? Like you're in your normal day to day, but you're like, man, there's something missing. Until you find that, like you just can't shake it, and
It wrecks you.
It does.
Wrecks you.
It
It wrecks
really
your
does.
heart.
Yes.
I get it the first time I went to Cambodia. When I came back, it wrecked me because it was little children getting sex trafficked, 2 years old. And I still can't talk about it without getting emotional. It wrecked me, and I came back, and what can I do? I can bring awareness to it because people
Yep.
don't even know about it. So I get what you're saying. It just wrecks you.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And that's how God kind of uses these situations, right? Wake us up.
Yeah.
And it's just putting our yes on the table, right? Like showing up's half the battle. And, me just being available that summer to serve changed my life. And I came back with the burden to do something for kids in hard neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And, I eventually essentially just got to the point where I wasn't doing anything. So I just prayed and asked God to take the wheel. And I literally just started driving around the city. Because inaction, right, isn't going to do anything
That's
if you
right.
just sit at home. And so it's like, let me get out there and see what happens. And literally the Lord took the wheel. I ended up with a friend at a church on D Street in Washington. And we talked to a pastor there that was like, hey, we're in the middle of like a 40-day prayer and fast thing as our church. And you showed up on our doorstep saying you want to work with kids. I think this is an answer to prayer.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, really? Like, you've been praying for us? I don't even know who you are. And we came the next morning, and he introduced us to their youth pastor at the time, which was working with another organization called YWAM, or Youth with a Mission. Mm-hmm. He was like, look, let me take you to this neighborhood. So we got in his car. We went to this neighborhood. He told this story. He said, and this is a neighborhood that was notorious in North Las Vegas for crime. So that the North Las Vegas police actually started a substation right in the middle of this apartment complex. When we were driving around, like literally every plant had died. So it's just dirt. But there was something glistening, all across the dirt. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, it was glass. It was broken bottles. And you had these little kids everywhere. And I didn't see any adults. And so you had all these kids just essentially just roaming the neighborhood. And I'm thinking, wow, like this is like a third world country. Like it really did look like something that was like out of a movie or something. And my friend who we just met that morning says, look, I've been praying over this neighborhood for 3 years. I've been doing prayer walks where it was him and his friend. He's African-American. He actually grew up in Africa. God sent him to the United States to work as a missionary. He had been doing prayer walks with his friend who's Hispanic, and apparently that looked suspicious to the police. And so multiple times he had been stopped, questioned, handcuffed, thrown against the hood of the car, like all this stuff from the police because, right, like in that neighborhood, that's essentially what was happening, some bad stuff. And he was like, look, I've been praying for 3 years that God will send someone who's willing to love these kids.
Yeah.
He said there are hundreds of kids here who need the gospel. They need someone to spend time with them. They need someone to love them. Yeah. And I think God sent you here. And I was like, what? Me? Are you sure? Like, I don't know. I've been praying God, but this is like real, right? This is like when it gets a little like risky in our faith. And I went home and fought it. Honestly, like it's like one of those things where you're like, it sounds so heroic, how I stepped up, and I was not heroic. I was very like cautious and like I did not want to jump in. And God just confirmed it. He actually took me to 1 Corinthians 13 where it talks about, if you do anything, like make sure you do it in love.
In love, yeah.
And one of the things that really like God was just like depositing this like truth in me was that God loves those kids way more than I do.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going to bless the work of my hands, not because of me. It really in spite of me. It's because he loves the kids on the other side of the service that I was going to be involved in. And not knowing that, God was going to bless it. Club Christ was going to grow from this one little apartment complex to all across the city, serving over 100 kids a week with tutoring and mentoring. And it really, it blew up, and I got to do that full time as my job for 17 years.
Wow. As you're speaking, like the image that I have in my head is like this huge tapestry, and you can see how each part of this tapestry is being woven and knit together in your life. And even when you try to run from it, God's saying, like, you're not going anywhere. This is your calling. This is what you're going to do. So how many locations do you have now?
There's 4 locations. There's 3 of them that are just independent, kind of in an apartment complex. There's one that's we partner with the church and do it kind of in their kids area, which they don't use during the week.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's apartments nearby, so kids get to come. We get to just serve them and bless them. And I'm not the executive director anymore. Joshua is, who's doing an incredible job there. I'm still on the board, though, and still really an advocate for growth and just seeing God use it to bless more kids.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges you've experienced throughout the year in ministry?
Yeah, challenges. Wow. Wow, where do I start? Money? No. I mean, that's really the biggest thing is, if it's God's work, he's going to provide, right? Like, he's going to be in it and he's going to sustain it. And that's been a faith journey, is saying, it's nonprofit work, right? So where does the money come from to be able to work and do this full time? Where it comes from the generosity of the community. Mm-hmm. And the thing about Las Vegas that people don't realize is that there's, majority of our city they're transplants, and not only are they transplants, but they're transient. Mm-hmm. And so you get people who come here for an opportunity and they're here for 4 or 5 years, they leave. And so in terms of like people's investment into this city and the culture, the infrastructure of this city, it's very low, because people have lived here for 20, 30 years, and you say, where are you from? And they say, well, I'm from Alabama, because they lived there for 10 years or whatever, And so there's not a lot of investment, and it's really kind of a really small pool of nonprofits here in this city. And, I really am envious of these, other cities that have all these foundations, all these, just this rooted community. But what I know about Las Vegas and why I feel like God called me to start a nonprofit is that this is a town of new things, and really ambitious new things. And I feel like that's even in the kingdom realm, when it's not just these casinos you see on the strip that are ambitious and huge and people flock. It's even, I've seen God just do some really incredible things with the ministry that's been happening, not only just with kids, right? You talked about kind of the dark side of the sex trafficking industry. There's a lot of friends I know that are making headway there and rescuing women from that and doing some incredible work. My wife's been involved in some of that. And so, there's just a new thing, that's here, and God's continuing to do that, which is really cool.
Yeah. No. So what are some of the challenges that you deal with when you deal with different ethnicity and the families? Like, you have to go in and get them to trust you.
Yeah.
With their children especially.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't see that a lot. People coming in and they just want to help you. Like, they think there's always an agenda.
Yeah.
Right? How do you get over that trust?
Yeah. Really my, this ministry is with the overlooked and underserved. And so while at one hand there are obstacles when it comes to engagement, maybe it's first impressions, I've always kind of been sensitive to that, I'm an outsider in these communities. I look different than a lot of them, just the color of my skin and kind of how I've, my culture that I bring in. And so I have to be sensitive to that. But I also know, like, there's such a lack of resources, and it's humans. It's not really just money. It's people who are mature and can be a mentor, can be like that. One of the big things that we're experiencing is this epidemic of fatherless homes, right? Of these homes that don't have, someone, not just like the biological father, but just a male figure that's a positive influence on kids. And it really is something that it breaks my heart, because I think even sociologically you can find that just the disadvantage that creates in a young person's life when they don't have that kind of person, that male figure in their life. And so one of the neatest things is just kind of being able to kind of offer that.
Yeah.
And I think, more and more people should really consider because here's the thing about mentoring. Mentoring can be formal, but a lot of it can be just really informal.
Right.
And I think that's where kind of a lot of the best mentoring happens, is that when you're in a situation where I just need to go to Lowe's for a little bit, to get some stuff, man, why don't you just bring someone alongside you? Or, for example, one of the things one little side thing I've been doing is helping these inner city kids learn how to drive. Most of their parents do not have cars. And if they did, they wouldn't have a car to necessarily teach their kid. And so, man, I'm teaching a kid, he's not a kid anymore, he's 25. But I knew him when he was in middle school at Club Christ, and we've stayed in touch. And so, I on a Friday afternoon or on a weekend, I'll stop by for an hour, and I'll have him ride around the neighborhood and stuff. And his driving test is in 2 weeks, and he's going to use my car to take his driver's test, because he doesn't have any other vehicle. And what that's going to do for him is just going to open up a realm of possibilities. Right. Where he can move forward in his life, and I'm working on him getting him into college and getting him graduated soon. So there's a whole nother kind of thing with that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the challenges, I mean, I think a lot of us kind of write our own narrative when it comes to I'm too different, or this is too much. We've always had a hard time finding volunteers for our older teens, because when you get older, for kids, there's kind of this universal acceptance, and they're just kids. But when you get to be a teenager and you're you got the slang, and you look a little different, you're a little hard around the edges.
They live in a different realm.
Oh my, yes. Oh my. And you're trying to be how can I relate?
Yeah.
Well, it's the universal language of love.
Yes.
It really is. You can't deny the fact that if someone is known and loved, that's the secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
To transformation. And when you spend time with someone, man, one of the greatest kind of volunteers we've ever had is this guy named Larry. And Larry's an older white gentleman who goes to a pretty conservative church across town. And what he does every Monday, he'll get on his bike, and he bikes from his home, which is about, I would say, 10 miles away from our center, to the center, and gets there, and he spends an hour in our Bible study with our teenagers, who are, young African-American, boys and girls, who are very different from him, because he is using his senior years, his older years, to invest into the next generation. And that kind of courage.
Yeah.
We need more, right? We need that cross-generational ministry.
Yeah. I mean, wow, you said a lot there, and a lot went through my head, but I wrote down some things. I think I read this book, Neighborly. Before I go to that, I want to say, to solidify what you were saying, that people want to be seen and they want to be heard.
Yeah.
And they want to know that they're loved and feel a sense of belonging, right? But this book, I don't know if you've read it, Neighborly.
I haven't.
And what you are talking about is the epitome and the basis of this book, which is, I don't think you go in and you try to fix things. You try to figure out what people want.
Yep.
Because a lot of time churches and nonprofits, they go in and they think they know what people need based on their needs.
Yep.
Right? And they go in and try to fix things. And I see you going in and loving people and really digging into what their needs are.
Yep.
They need to drive. I'm going to get in the car. You need to go to Lowe's. I want to take you to Lowe's. I'm going to do these things. And that's the best way, to do ministry and to draw people to you, because you're not making them feel like you are the fixer and you know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you encountered any challenges in that space?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to cross-cultural ministry too, you have to be sensitive to that reality.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things we were sensitive to in our approach to bringing resources to these communities was that people would often give us clothing to pass out, or they'd give us, some of their old toys or whatever. They just kind of dump their stuff on us.
Yeah.
And what we found was we were like, we don't want to ever have the perception that we're these essentially white people in this neighborhood giving out free stuff. Yeah. We wanted to be a neighbor and not be seen as like, hey, what can I get from you? We wanted to have that mutuality, and we really have worked hard to establish that. And so, because it can be very easily, especially, when you work in communities that have kind of the welfare system has been on kind of like conditioning generational kind of poverty. You really have to be careful not to feed into that kind of, I don't know, like this
stigma mentality.
Yeah, this mentality that, it's just me. And that was one of the things that we made sure we incorporated too, is like serving opportunities for these kids in these inner city contexts. Like we took these inner city kids down to Mexico to serve.
Yes.
And that was gnarly. That was so eye-opening for them. It was super dangerous.
Did you go to YWAM?
We didn't. We partnered with this other organization, but like we went to this drug rehab facility in Ensenada, and it was the most beautiful picture of God's love is, it was this moment where we had all of our teenagers there giving manicures and pedicures to these women at the essentially just had this drug rehab facility had taken in women that literally were at the bottom, of their life and just trying to recover. And they hadn't had someone take the time to really, like serve them at that like intimate level. And man, I just got to see all of these teenagers just serve so lovingly, and be patient and kind, And I was like, man, if you could see the next generation do more of this, we got a lot of hope for the future.
And you can give them purpose though.
Totally.
Right? You found purpose, and it's not what you're doing with them. It's not giving handouts. It's that you are giving them purpose.
Yes.
And letting them see there's more to life, and they have a reason to be here, and they can do so much more and be so much more and have so much more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is great. So tell me a success story.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the, the things when you talk about mentoring, we do bring a lot of generational kind of baggage to our stories, right? We all have this kind of like layer, like, and, there's a saying that I love that's, Jesus may be in your heart, but grandpa's in your bones. Yeah. And there's even a sense that like, man, there's stuff that kind of haunts us. So one of the things I talk about, kind of fatherless homes being a thing. Well, the reality had been, you didn't see a lot of people who were married in these neighborhoods. And so for me, I became an apologetics for the institution of marriage for these especially these young men who just were like, I don't know, why am I going to get married? Yeah. Like we're just going to get divorced, or, I could just, live with my girl, whatever. And so one of the things that was really incredible was this story of this young man named London who I met when he was in middle school, and got to just see him choose to follow Jesus, when he was in high school. And God really just did a radical work in him. He met this really cute girl that he fell in love with, and we, would talk about that, and we'd go out to lunch or whatever. And one day we were out to lunch and he said, hey, I think I'm going to, pop the question. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, but here's the thing. Like, I'm kind of nervous because he starts sharing his story of his family. Mm-hmm. He said, in 3 generations of my family, there's not been one wedding.
Wow.
No one has gotten married. And I don't know what it even I've never been to a wedding, and I don't know what that even entails, what that looks like. And I said, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna help you out. And so I made some phone calls, and a good pastor friend of mine was like, hey, I'll open my church up. My story's just like that. Yeah. And man, at this wedding, it was incredible. The sad thing was, we show up at this wedding and, he comes from a, single parent home. His mom, he's got 7 siblings. And one of his cousins was going to be the ring bearer. And it's like 30 minutes before the wedding starts. And he comes to me and he's like, hey, my mom's not coming. Oh. And man, it broke my heart. And I just knew at that moment, right? Like God had positioned me to kind of step in the gap for him in this moment. And I said, don't worry about it. And my little boy was there and I said, why don't you have Owen go and be the ring bearer? And he's like, well, what are you? And I was like, yeah. So he got to be the ring bearer. The wedding was beautiful. And at the reception, I got to be the one that did the toast, right? I got to be the one that affirmed him and said, look, this is a young man who's proved himself, as trustworthy, and you can trust him. And so it was beautiful. It was one of those things that's like, man, that generational really burden over his life was broken in that day, and he's going to be able to then set the example for his kids in the future.
Wow, that's really powerful, Evan. I'm emotional from it. You make me cry. Breaking those generational curses are like so powerful because they are so strong.
They are.
So being able to unlink them and give those kids freedom is amazing. I would love to have you and him on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So he can share his story.
Oh, it'd be great.
Yeah, I think so many people and kids would be encouraged by it to know, like, we can take that different direction.
Indeed.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? I mean, here's the thing. I really, when you talk about being a fisher of men, that's essentially, my heart is just to go after guys that are disengaged at church.
Yeah.
I see too many men these days really just being drugged to church and having, their significant other, whether their girlfriend or their wife, lead spiritually, which is, again, it's not a bad thing, but like what I do see, is the church needs men to step up, and it just takes they just need to be initiated into that. I mean, invited and initiated. And it takes another man to kind of push a little bit, sometimes. And, I just love that kind of ministry of activation and having men just kind of like step into their own, essentially, with just a little encouragement. I have a weekly, meeting with a couple guys, and we've been going through the New Testament. So we read a couple chapters a week, and we talk about it. But what really is important is we're developing the habit of being in God's word, and then also opening our hearts to each other when it comes to our struggles. And I think guys have a hard time doing that. And we need to have intentional time to do that. And so like my hope is that, I can kind of encourage more men in this city to do that. And my wife is doing it on the other side, right? My wife's Vanessa has the citywide ministry called Ignite Life, and she's doing incredible work. I know she's been on this podcast, which is fun. All around the city, just really, providing that kind of safe place for women to encounter God and be vulnerable and share their burdens. And so I'd love to kind of see more of that happen for men.
Awesome. She's different from you. She didn't want questions.
She's natural. I know. She's amazing.
She's a natural. Well, thank you for sharing that. How can people come alongside Club Christ and partner with you?
Yeah, Club Christ is just, go to their website, clubchrist.org, and kind of shoot them an email if you're interested in more information. If you're here locally in Las Vegas, there's a lot of needs for more tutors and mentors, people just willing to play a game with the kid, spend time with them. You don't even have to be a Christian, to do that. It's just really, we have a whole education side that, just helps kids kind of get by, right? And in school. And so, so, I mean, just check out the website and clubchrist.org.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Evan, for being the hands and feet of Jesus and following your calling and your purpose. I appreciate you being on the podcast. Any final takeaways?
Man, Sally, I just, say yes to if God's got something on your heart, and there might be someone listening, who hasn't done anything, you know, who's just sitting on an idea or a thought or a dream, you know, I encourage you to do something with it, you know, whether it be just to drive around the city, make that phone call, set up that appointment with someone that you've been meaning to talk to, man, do it, because life is short, you know, and there's a lot of need out there, and we got to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah. Thank you again. And, you know, my takeaway is find your purpose. Finding your purpose in life and living a purpose-driven life is so powerful. So thank you again for listening. See you next time.